Standardized testing, one of the biggest culprits in the dumbing down. Now, I teach an English 2 EOC course, and one thing I've noticed is often the most creative students do the poorest on these tests, because what happens is if you're creative and start using words like, well, it could mean this or it could mean that. In other words, if you start thinking critically about more of the context, you're almost always going to steer yourself in the wrong direction. I have to literally tell students, don't ask what could be true. Go with the most obvious, most likely, safest bet possible. So what we are unintentionally teaching our students is to always play it safe in school when it comes to what matters most, testing. Because if you get too creative and start trying to creatively or critically think about what could be the answer, I've noticed students almost always steer off in the wrong direction. They have some wonderful ideas, creative, and it could be great, but there's not much place for that if you're just reducing it down to A, B, C, D. Let me give you some examples.
All right, just real quick. This is the poem, How Do I Love Thee? And this is similar to a publicly released testing sample to help prepare for an upcoming state test. And I'm not going to read the whole poem, How Do I Love Thee? But the basic is, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach. It goes on to say, I love thee freely, purely, with a passion put to use in my old griefs, my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seem to lose my lost saints. And if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. And if you read this poem and you come across this last line about, I shall but love thee better after death, if God choose, you can make a strong case that this could be a poem that the speaker poet wrote to someone who had just passed, if they're using the present tense love here to say, hey, I love thee, even though your body has passed away, I still love thee. Death cannot separate us. I still feel connected to thee now. So not that I loved you, but I love you because you are still with me, so to speak. Our spirits are still connected. I still love thee. Not I have lost you, even death can't separate us. So that could be a real strong poetic meaning of this. But if you picked that or something similar like someone reflecting on a lost lover, you would be wrong. You would also be wrong if you express someone expressing their faithfulness in God, which again is kind of an open-ended question as to how someone actually expresses their personal, spiritual, or religious belief. But you'd be wrong too if you pick that. The correct answer according to the test is C, someone expressing their sincere dedication. And the reason that's correct is it's the safest answer, right? Because whoever the speaker is speaking to, living or passed away, it's definitely a poem that expresses sincere dedication. And sure, you can help teach someone how to identify the safest, most likely one. And I'm not saying that all questions don't lend themselves better to some multiple choice options with the more obvious right answer, but it's quite common in tests, based especially on poetry, or something that's supposed to be artistic, to really come down to two options that for all the world, you could debate them forever if you're allowed to think and say, well, it could mean this if.
So again, if once you look under the hood and you start to notice things like this is what putting so much weight in for our entire worth of our education system, of our schools, to make a child feel successful or not based on how well they answer multiple choice test questions. And when we start to equate how smart you are with how well you did on a multiple choice test almost exclusively, it's no wonder a lot of students are, I don't know if traumatized is the right word, but just disengaged because it's such a limited way of measuring intelligence. Now, sure, there can be a place for multiple choice testing, and if you do well on that, you should by all means celebrate. But again, it's the whole approach to not be able to have a conversation with some deep thinking and learning about this, but saying, no, you have to learn the tricks and the trade of how to reduce everything down to the safest, most likely A, B, C, D, based upon understanding how the test company's biases factor into deciding that A is better answer than B. And yes, companies do their due diligence of trying to get rid of not well-written questions and all that kind of stuff and biases. However, the very dependence on a multiple choice test, the way we have started to idolize that, you can teach to the test and help students start to learn how to do better on any said test with certain methods. But I'd say that comes at the expense of humans authentically being curious, full of wonder, and our schools full of greater joy.